Good morning, everyone. My name is Eric DeCock. As Tegan mentioned, I'm the Director of Interdisciplinary Planning at Ascent. We're a for-profit, I almost said nonprofit. We're a consulting firm based here in California with offices throughout the state. We do a lot of work on wildfire resilience, most notably on vegetation treatment. You might know us for our work on the CAWFC vegetation treatment program and the EIR. We do a lot of streamlining work for project-specific or landscape-scale treatment projects, as well as a new project for us called the Fire Adapted Communities Roadmap and Dashboard, which we'll be talking about. That's paid for by CAL FIRE, so thank you CAL FIRE for this funding and for the partnership with Resources Legacy Fund as well to make this happen. But we're really not going to do a deep dive on the project today. We're really going to have a conversation about fire-adapted communities. You heard Chief Berlant, you heard other folks, speakers this morning already talk about the need for scaling, for kind of doing all of the above and kind of doing things at the community scale. So we're really going to dig into that and what it means to kind of build capacity and really make things happen at those different scales that we're talking about today. I introduced myself. I would like to have our panelists, my fellow panelists, I should say, introduce themselves as well. So I'll quickly hand it over to Michelle and then Jana for self-introductions.
Hi, folks. It's great to be here with you today. I'm Michelle Medley-Daniel. I'm coming to you from far northern California in a little town called Hayfork in the middle of the Shasta Trinity National Forest, where I co-direct a place-based nonprofit called the Watershed Research and Training Center. For the last 30 years, that organization has been working to do kind of what Victor talked about, to reconnect our community and the people in our community to that landscape through our economy and to really learn about what it means to be stewards of that place. And so while we work locally, I've spent the last decade learning about what it means to live better with fire across this country. And so I direct something called the Fire Adapted Communities Network, where we partner with the Forest Service and Departments of Interior to work with communities to understand their cultural relationship with fire and how to evolve that. And I also have the great pleasure of working with Eric and Jana and a bunch of other folks in this room on the Fire Adapted Communities Work Group for the task force, where we're really building a strategy for the state of California to think about what it means to live better with wildfire in the diverse kinds of contexts that we work in across the state.
Awesome. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jana Valikovic. I'm with the University of California in the Cooperative Extension Program. I feel like I'm having a little bit of an out-of-body moment. I feel like I'm sort of on the Oprah show, sitting in a couch. It's really weird to actually sit and talk. I'm supposed to stand and talk. So anyway, if you want to relate to that awkwardness, maybe you can laugh about it. Anyway, so, talking about adaptation, right? It involves meaning that we're really being able to get comfortable in places that we're uncomfortable in. So I think that's kind of funny to start out. So I'm a forester by training. I'm a scientist, and I'm someone who, in my job, I'm the forest advisor. And I talk to people about trees, and I talk to trees about people as sort of a fundamental way that I think about the world. But really, it's about trying to tell the story of the place and understand the place both in scientific and social terms, and being able to express and relate where we're at to find place-based solutions to our challenges. I'm housed in the North Coast where the giant redwood trees are. I live in Eureka and Arcata, California. And I'm one of those odd people that actually managed to stay where I was born, only traveling about 100 miles from my home community. So anyone out there that still lives where they were raised? A few more. Well, thank you for bringing your expertise to the new place that you are located, and thank you for sharing and staying in the place that you are. I think that's a key ingredient really around building a qualified workforce and really building people that have vision and can bring the durability of solutions to a community because they're rooted and grounded in that community. So my job is really as a scientist. I'm part of a new team in California with the Fire Network within the University of California. We're in partnership with county government. So I've had the opportunity to work at many scales, and I look forward to sharing some of our stories and really hoping that we can get to a place where we can figure out what living in California in 2050 is going to look like, and living in California in, I can't even say the numbers, 2100. I mean, these are really funny numbers to say. So thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you. So I'm really excited. We're going to have a conversation. I'm just going to talk at you a little bit with slides and bullet points I'm really jealous of Victor's presentation because, man, those were some awesome images, and what a storyteller. Thank you so much, Victor, for coming all the way from Australia. That was really energizing for me. I don't know about you all, but thank you. Yeah, please. Fire-adapted communities. Numerous folks have already said adaptation communities, right? I mentioned that earlier. What is fire-adapted communities? Well, there's a wheel on the screen here. I'll talk about that wheel in a minute, but this term has been around a while. This term has been around close to 20 years. It was kind of curated by some federal partners. I know there's even people in this room that might have actually worked on this way back when. And then, of course, as Michelle mentioned, there's a whole learning network, and her organization has been incubating this idea for a while. And it's actually even mentioned in the governor's Wildfire and Forest Resilience Task Force Action Plan, right? It's under Goal 2 if you've seen it. This image actually appears. But if you read the plan closely, the plan doesn't quite yet align with this way of thinking. We're starting to get there. But let me walk you through the wheel a little bit and so you can see kind of what it covers. We've got landscape treatment starting kind of on the upper quadrant. We've got public health, prevention, regulations, policies, and plans. Infrastructure and business. Of course, I'm on the inner ring of the wheel, not the outer ring. We'll talk about the outer ring of the wheel in a moment. Infrastructure and business, recovery, safety and evacuation, wildfire response, resident mitigation, and last but definitely not least, and maybe the core ingredient of all of them, is partnerships and then community engagement. That out of the ring of the wheel is not intended to be limiting. Even this wheel itself is really just a model, right? It's not a perfect model of how the world actually works or how all these pieces connect and fit together. And then, in fact, the idea behind fire-adapted communities is that it's really rooted in place and needs to respect the uniqueness of the places that we live and that we're concerned about when we think about fire. So just think of this as an imperfect model. It's a way to start thinking about how all the pieces come together and connect. If you're to look at the outer part of this wheel, you might say, gosh, there's things that I'm working on that are missing or things that should be up there, and that's okay, right? This is just an idea to stimulate our thinking about a holistic approach to community scale of fire adaptation. I will say that this new Fire Adapted Communities Roadmap and Dashboard project that I mentioned earlier, we are working with the working group under the governor's task force on a statewide framework and a strategy that can possibly begin to inform the next version of the statewide action plan. Right now, we're looking at it more of sort of a way to kind of incubate and start a conversation about what's really needed to create a strategy that connects goals, actions, implementation, funding, partnership building in a way that we didn't really see before, right? So it's kind of a big picture planning effort. It's a strategic planning effort, but eventually what we hope to see is that it really begins to inform creation of a shared vision, something that everyone can get behind, whether it's state agencies, federal partners, regional entities that are getting grants, local fire safe councils, cities, counties, you name it, firefighters, everyone's at the table doing this work together. And that we create that connection, we create a strategy that everyone really has buy-in behind. I mentioned who's doing this work. It is being done through the task force. It is being funded by CAL FIRE with a Resources Legacy Fund as our sponsor. And it is being led by my firm on a consulting basis, but again, it is a collaborative effort through this working group and a lot of support. So I just want to say thank you to everyone that's involved. We did create a vision statement, which I'll talk about very briefly shortly, as well as a baseline assessment that I literally just hit send on to the working group today. So for those of you that are in the working group, it's in your inboxes now. I can't wait to get your feedback. We'll talk about some other outreach and engagement opportunities later, but I wanted to just let folks know that there's a series of work we're doing that will eventually lead to sort of this roadmap, this strategic plan, which is coming up probably later in the year, early 2024. What is the vision? The vision really that we've created so far in partnership with the working group is to set redefining our relationship with fire, right? We heard this from Victor and others already this morning, of this need to really think differently and to respect the fire's role in our landscape and that our communities exist in that context. We're thinking about obviously protecting and sustaining the places we live. That's important. Accelerating the effectiveness of all the fire prevention planning, mitigation, response, evacuation, and even recovery activities that we need to be concerned about. So we're doing that holistically, right? Thinking about all the different pieces of the puzzle. We're thinking about multi-scalar, cross-sectoral work, and this is hard work. We need to leverage investment, prioritize actions, embrace equitable approaches that are holistic, and empower our communities themselves with the right supports from the public sector, right, to get this work done. And really respecting the uniqueness of California's places and landscapes. So with that, we're going to shift to a panel discussion, but before we do that, Michelle's going to do a little bit of level setting and a little bit of engagement with you all. So I'll hand it over to Michelle. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Eric. So if we want to be developing a strategy for fire-adapted communities in the state of California, that means we need to be engaging everyone. If we really want to live better with fire, that doesn't mean the state just takes action. That means we all take action. And so we want to start that by inviting you all to do a little hand raising around your roles with fire. So I want you don't need to look up here, just listen for my questions, and then if you could just raise your hand if that applies to you. I'd love for people to kind of make some eye contact with other folks that might be working on similar things or different things so that we can, as a result of this conversation, be getting more connected to other people who are working in this work. So if folks would raise their hands if they've been working in wildfire or wildfire resilience for at least 6 months. All right, keep them up. You can lower your hand if you've been working for more than 3 years.
Lower?
Oh, sorry. Yes, I should have thought that through. Keep it up if you've been working for more than 3 years, so you can lower it if you've been only working in less than that. Okay, keep it up if you've been working for more than 5 years. Okay, 10 years. 20 years. All right, 30 years. Okay, everyone can lower their hands. So we have that same kind of ecosystem that Victor was talking about this morning of people who are bringing brand new perspectives to fire, who maybe have only been in fire for 6 months. We've got those folks in this room, and we also have people who've spent their lifetimes dedicated to work here. Can you raise your hand if you've been negatively impacted by a fire? Okay, everyone put their hands down. Raise your hand if you've been positively impacted by a fire. Raise your hand if you've used fire and worked with fire. Raise your hand if you've worked on the mitigation end of fire. Okay, you can put your hands down. What about on the planning side of fire? Okay, what about on actual response and engaging with fire? And then folks that have worked in fire recovery, if you'd raise your hand. All right, thanks so much. So I know that can't characterize the full relationship with fire that we all might have, but hopefully that gives you just an idea of the kind of diverse perspectives and experiences that are present in this room with people's different relationships with fire. And I hope that over the course of the next couple of days, we can really explore how to use all those perspectives to really come up with new solutions and strategies that we can leverage. So I'm gonna hand things over to Eric for our first question.
Yeah, okay. First question of the day. Why do we need this new framework, that wheel? Why do we need a new model? What's the impetus behind this and why are we doing it?
So when we first made that model, it was really in an effort to try to describe the system, the fire system that we saw. And while it is totally imperfect, I think what we realized as we were in conversation around the country with different communities who were all trying to work with fire in different ways, everywhere from the Pine Barrens in New Jersey to more urban contexts like Austin, Texas, or Boise, to really rural communities like mine in Northern California, we realized that people needed to redefine the problem. So if we always think about our fire issues as a vegetation problem and a fire suppression or management problem, we will always come up with vegetation management solutions. But if we instead try to reframe what the issues are, and as Victor and some of our other speakers this morning suggested to us, try to think about fire from a systems approach. What is missing from our fire system? Is it the human and relationship with fire and relationship with place as well as it is a vegetation problem? That's the conclusion that we came to in sort of talking with hundreds of people across the US, that there's a bunch of complex systems that are interrelated. And so while we absolutely need to work on vegetation management and fire management issues, we also need to restore our cultural relationships with fire. And so the point of this framework and the point, I think, of our strategy, our fire adapted community strategy for the state, is really to invite people to help us reframe that question and say, what is it that we need to fix? What do we need to get in better relationship with? And I think we'll come up with much more nuanced solutions once we start re-asking those questions.
You're so good. So good. You know, when I think about, it's a good question, Eric, and so I'm a little off script. That's just how I run, if you didn't know that. But the thing that has been that I've been thinking a lot about lately is we've just gone through a global pandemic, and the level of investment in public health, you know, is dimensional. It's been long-term. It's been sustained. It goes through the same ebbs and flows of financial investment that we do in the vegetation management space. But we really have to move to that space where it's not just an acute challenge. We're not just responding to the single incident. We're building a long-term durable strategy that deals with the chronic issues. And you know, you can't pass the buck. And within that is a whole lot of culture change. I was recently at a conference in Tahoe with all the California Master Gardeners. So we have 7,000 volunteer Master Gardeners across California, and they're part of our organization, and I was talking to them, and a couple of them said to me, you know, that's really great that you're gonna talk about this fire mitigation stuff. You know, the amazing part is I live in a community where wildfire is not an issue. And I said, really? Where are you from? San Diego. Oh, really? Wildfire's not an issue? Okay, that's terrific. I'm glad you've got it solved there, right? We don't have it solved yet. We don't see ourselves as a part of the issue, and we don't see ourselves in this issue. We see it always as someone else's problem. I'll talk to my mom about this, and she'll say, oh yeah, I got it covered, but my neighbor, it's all about my neighbor's issues. I'm like, no, Mom, you need to lead by example. You really need to lead by example. So, you know, what is our time and space element in this one? I just want to conclude by saying I was struck. The biggest fire in California this year has been in Del Norte County. Anybody know where Del Norte County is? Okay, a few of you. It's the very tippy top of the state on the coast. We had a 100,000 acre fire. We had maybe one home lost in that fire. Major evacuations, and then we also had a power line shut down for 3.5 weeks. My colleagues did a study to look at the economic effect of loss of tourism, all the indirect effects, the loss of power, and the resulting number was $1,800 per person loss in that 3-week incident. Do you know what the median income is in Del Norte County? $2,000 a month. The indirect effects, the shadow effects of wildfire in that context, to me, are very difficult to recover from. And we didn't even lose structures in that space, and we didn't burn down the power lines either. We just had to shut them down. The urgency to figure out how we restore our ecosystems, how we live with our ecosystems, how we work in this space, the time urgency is extreme. And so, you know, adaptation is critical for all of us, and critical that we scale to that quickly. So I'd like to ask the next question here, which is, what about shared vision? How do we get to shared vision? I mean, how does that community of Del Norte feel? They feel impacted. There's a lot of good fire in that fire too. Let me be clear about that. But how do we get to that shared vision? You guys have any ideas?
Well, I can start with saying that it was really cool to see a draft vision statement come together collaboratively with this working group. You know, we had 25 organizations, state agencies, local agencies, fire safe councils, habitat folks, you know, folks that are like me that are consulting but not necessarily on the ground. Like, there was a lot of different people at the table coming up with what you see in these bullet points on the screen, and you'll notice that there is a really big focus on the human element, on our communities. And what we really talked about is capacity building, right? This need to really connect. We know what we need to physically do on the ground, in people's homes, in people's yards, in the landscape, the transformative work to use technology to respond better, right? We know the tactics, but what we lack is the connecting points and the capacity building. And I think that really came out super strongly to me, and you'll see some of that woven through here. is the reality that we're empowering communities to do this work. I actually do a lot of consulting work in climate adaptation more broadly. I work with fire, I work with sea level rise, I work with extreme heat. I work with folks all over the state in the Western US that are really grappling with the reality of changes that are beyond our control and ways that we've never seen before. So I think we see the really need for that adaptive capacity being built into our structures of how we govern, how we connect with each other in communities. And I think that really is what we're trying to get to through this visioning, is we're trying to get that clarity point of what's the through line and how do we really drive action? What are the levers of change that we all own, and we all need to get behind that.
Yeah, thanks so much, Eric, for all that framing. I think we're presented with a really unique opportunity right now. You heard from some of the speakers that were up here talking about federal and state investments. We're at a really unique point in time where I think we've recognized that we can't keep addressing fire in the ways we have. We need to make different investments. We need all levels of government and residents and community to really start taking action. And so I think that creates both an amazing kind of call to action and opportunity, but also a real challenge in that we're not going to have all one single thing that we can do. We live in really different communities. The state of California is enormous. We have so many different cultural communities in California and ecological systems in California. And so while we have this enormous need, and I think we are past the threshold of recognition, when I first started working in wildfire, I remember coming to conferences, and there was so much more conversation about how are we going to get people to acknowledge that we need to have a different conversation. And I think we have passed that point now, and we're into the space where we can start talking about what are the conversations we need to have and start turning those conversations into different strategies and shared visions. And I think as we move into the space of needing to create lots of shared vision, it needs to also remain really flexible. So one of the challenges I've seen with all of that is that if people try to make one plan for how we're going to move forward in a state as diverse as California, we're not going to get there. So many people are going to be left out of that vision. And so I think the opportunity we have with this strategy that we're creating for the state is really to make space for a lot of different shared visions, a lot of those different communities that Victor was talking about again in his talk, those different vegetative communities. In the same way that we might need to burn in a certain pine community at a certain time, we need to have a different relationship with fire in Trinity County than in Ventura County. And we're trying to build a framework that really makes space for that.
You know, I think we have a lot of ingredients, we have a lot of words, but we don't quite have that vision yet that we're all invested in yet. You know, when we use the word resilience, you know, what does that mean? We use the word adaptation. They're kind of heady terms. You know, when you're talking to your neighbor, like they're going, okay, well, right? You know, those are not things that the average person really grasps, but what they get is that they have more clean air days, they have less school disruption, they have reliable power, they have an awareness that, you know, there's a wildfire burning over in such community and it's fine, it's gonna be fine. Or there's some smoke in the air from a prescribed fire and it's okay. I mean, even this year, I'm just struck by actually the enhanced level of comfort we're developing with prescribed fire and just the signage that we see, and people aren't calling it in as much and they're feeling okay about it. But we need to find really approachable terms, tangible ways that people are going to connect, and we really need to give a vision for hope, right? And we know what we don't want, but we don't really articulate what we do want very well. And I mean, in this room are so many leaders at every scale, from the neighborhood to the community to the statewide strategy, and we have this opportunity to really say, we can get ourselves out of this. We can do it. It's going to take some investment. It's going to take action by all of us. But we can do it, and we need to know what it means at the local scale, what people feel empowered about at one scale, and then we need to be able to aggregate that out. It's not a top-down strategy. It's really a bottom-up one, and we need to take the time to listen. And there's a lot of anger out there and a lot of frustration. All of us know that. But we need to figure out how to translate that anger into positive action and have people feel like this is a place they can live in. And I'll stand behind this. Like, I would rebuild in Paradise today, hands down. I'd live in any community in California because we know how to build better and we know how to live smarter. And we just need to be able to share some of those key messages so that people can see what everyday actions make a difference in their lives that are going to, secure their family, secure their property, secure their animals, and secure a livelihood into the future. So I guess my challenge to you all is think about, how do you express that vision? For me, I often see in color, I see landscapes, I see it without words, and I don't know what it really means for everybody, but I really encourage you all to think about what vision and adaptation and a future means in this highly urbanized, highly diverse state.
Thanks so much, Yana. This reminds me, there's an awesome book called Climate Anxiety, and there's this field guide for climate anxiety. And one of the concepts in there is that one of the things we're really challenged by when we look ahead at this sort of uncertain future is our ability to imagine a vision of what it could be like. And so, I really do encourage you to take Yana's challenge seriously. Write down on a piece of paper, what is my vision of how I could be in relationship with fire? What is my vision for fire in the future? If we can start to articulate that together, we're going to be able to make it. If we can't even describe what it is, we can't work on it together. And so I think it's really, really important to take that as a serious task, that we need to be able to start describing what that actually means.
Well, and key, if I could just riff off that for a second, is so much of our language we use is about restoration, which is about going back to some other condition. And, California is highly developed at this point. The Bay Area is not, the human communities are not going away. But what we have to think about is levels of function and restoring function within a diversely developed state and defining what function means for all of us. I think we're stuck with that restoration paradigm, and we kind of need to put that one away. We need to put away the idea that all wildfires are related to forests. We got to put that one away. We're in Southern California. Clearly, you all understand it's not just about forests here. But you were in other parts of the state, and you'll be like, oh, it's just a forest fire issue, like that, my San Diego example, right? So I don't know how you've been thinking about this, but I've been really struggling with trying to think about what is restoration of function, not necessarily erasing the human element from our landscape.
Yeah, I think for me it comes down to, again, we're tearing off of what Victor said. You teed us up so well, Victor. But to me, restoring process is about restoring relationship. Processes are relationships. They're a description of how things are connected to one another. And I think that what's empowering about that, if we use the word relationship, is it gives us responsibility in that process. We are not part of all processes, but we can be part of a viable fire process in our communities. And so I just offer that, I think relationship is a strong concept for this. Well, so kind of building off of the conversation we've been having so far, I want to just take the opportunity to know that we have folks up on the stage here, as well as all of you out there, who have a lot of experience working in fire. So what are some of the things? Yana shared some things we maybe should put aside that we maybe think we know, but we need to reframe. What are some things we think we have learned, and what are some of the issues, challenges, and opportunities that are in front of us today?
I can start, Michelle, by saying what we're seeing already in the preliminary results from this baseline assessment we're doing is a continuing mismatch between resources and what needs to get done, right? A lot of money is flowing, and that is a huge milestone, and we should champion that. But what we're also learning is that the capacity of organizations to process grants, to report on them, to deal with what happens with your granting agency when things don't go well, workforce, not enough contractors out there to do the work, right? How many people have been having a hard time finding people just to get home hardening projects done or landscape treatment work done, right? If we want to scale this, we need to get more tactical and more strategic about where we're investing, how we're creating this capacity supports to deliver on results. If we're going to talk about scale, which we will in a minute, what needs to come into play to really make that happen? I think workforce, to me, probably is one of the #1 issues still, where we do not have the workforce ready to do things at scale. We're meeting needs, we're delivering on projects, but if we're going to do the big reaching to do millions of acres a year in treatments, or doing home hardening at scale that, is hundreds of times what we're doing today, we know intrinsically that it is going to require a massive investment in workforce. There's a lot of solutions on the table. Folks have ideas. We're seeing pilots. We're seeing results from pilot phases of this great new statewide program. I see Jay Lopez out there somewhere. I saw you earlier, Jay. I know we're working on this. But there's just such a huge need to invest at the local level. Where will people live that are doing all this work in places that haven't done this work before, right? Where will people come from and where will they live? There's so many questions about this workforce need that I think we need to dig into, and we're getting there, right? We're starting to dig into this, and it's exciting to see.
Well, I think you're exactly right. But the challenges are truly dimensional, especially in the workforce and the workforce housing piece and the economic development space. I live in the North State. If you haven't seen, we just released the I'm going to forget the name. Kristen, tell me a regional plan for the North State. What's the name of it? I just saw her a second ago. Anyway, one of the things that we figured out is that in the Wildfire Forest Action Plan, the North State has 4% of the state's population, but most of the water, most of the timber, most of the carbon, and we have the fewest amount of people to steward that. So finding solutions that are going to work to be able to build that qualified workforce is a real challenge. I think we had a great opener from Chief Berlant around the mitigations that matter and this idea. I think we have some really clear signals around where we need to take action. We need to socialize those. We need to make it easy and accessible. I still struggle a little bit, even though I work extensively in the home hardening space. I struggle with the term. I'm not sure it's really the right term yet for our communities. I don't think they can really relate to that term yet. But we have a really good understanding of what action can happen at the home scale, at the neighborhood scale, and at the community scale, and how we can do a lot of that work for low cost and a lot of do-it-yourselfer type activities that can make a significant difference, and to not feel defeated in that space. So I think there's a number of key ingredients that we have information about, and it's really about making sure that we make it accessible to folks, that people can try it on, feel comfortable in it, and then begin to own it and take action on the weekend. Right? Because it's about where we're going to squeeze it in between soccer and all the other things that are dividing our time to raising, healthy families and healthy communities. And within that is really being able to live in a positive way in the state.
Well, I think that gets back to the sort of idea that we've been talking about of being in relationship to fire, figuring out how taking these actions can become part of our daily lives and part of our culture. I think that if we think about fire work as risk reduction that we have to fit in sometime later, I think we're never going to actually do it, or we're only going to do it if we have some kind of really special incentive. And I think that a lot of the programs that we've created to help ourselves address these things are really based in this sort of information deficit model where it's like, well, people don't know what to do, and so that's why they're not taking action. And well, certainly we need to make sure that people do have access to information about what is effective. I think we should also question what is driving their action or inaction, and if it truly is a lack of information, or if it's that they're trying to raise 4 kids, have a job, figure out how to go through life. And so I think we'd be well served by trying to really think about some of these issues from a behavioral science standpoint and stop focusing so much on create information and start thinking about how do we help people take action on the information they have? What's within people's reach to take action on? What's preventing them from taking action? Really analyzing why we are not doing what we know we can do, because there are many, many things we know we can do. So I don't know if anyone has thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think for those of you who've gotten involved in the prescribed fire world, and maybe you've joined a prescribed burn association, and one of the things that's really clear is that everyone has a role. Everyone has a talent. Everyone has something to bring. And it's about trying to really harness that, whether it's making lunch, bringing water, whether it's working on the fire line itself. There's a role for everyone. And making sure that we engage our elders and our youth in that space and developing more comfort. Well, the same thing can be said in the home mitigation and the community mitigation space. I've been thinking a lot about like the role of service clubs, the role of youth groups. We know a heck of a lot about the vulnerability that our vents have, as an example. What does it take to upgrade a vent, right? It's some finer mesh screen, it's some wire clippers, and it's a staple gun, and maybe a ladder. So, you know, someone could cut the screen, someone could climb the ladder, someone could refill the staple gun, someone could be talking to their neighborhood. I mean, you could work house by house down a street without a lot of effort, without a lot of, you know, high-end investment, with, you know, a few dollars. And what it would do is it would stimulate action. It would stimulate a sense it's possible. Right, the same could be done as we try and roll out Zone 0, which is, you know, our new defensible space zone. What do we need? We need some rakes, we need some wheelbarrows, we need some sense of someone who's got some vision in the gardening space and can hold your hand and say, yes, we can still create beauty and function at the yard scale. We can do it differently. You're still going to be able to have your roses. I'm going to plug on you on those roses. You know, and we can still create that great opportunity to live in the way you like, but just do it ever so slightly differently. So how do we harness community groups and community space? Anyone thinking about that?
I was going to go in the money direction, because I think what you're talking about, it's really interesting to see some of the changes we've tried to make here in California. You know, we had the Safer from Wildfires initiative, which was the Department of Insurance's initiative, right? This idea that we'll actually reduce if you can get a premium. Now we're under the whole different space now, right? With insurance companies just pulling out in California entirely, which is disturbing. But we were at a time recently working on incentives to try to price risk differently if we've applied the mitigation at the property or the parcel scale. That thinking, it needs to be replicated across other financing tools that we have. Insurance is just the tip of the iceberg. It's an easy fix, but there's a lot more that we can do with local financing, right? Nobody likes to talk about taxes and fees. We actually had a fire fee in California that we gave up for political reasons, but it's a third rail. I know, I see the chiefs getting uncomfortable even talking about this, but you know, there's ways that locals can finance. I mean, we don't have to pay fees. We can actually use creative financing tools at local government's disposal. The Dodd bill last year created climate resilience districts. It's based on tax increment financing. It doesn't create any big funding burden today. It allows that fund to build up over time. We use tools like this all the time to finance infrastructure in California. A financing district like this can really activate and help to fill gaps where, let's say, FEMA funding or CAL FIRE funding, other funding just isn't available. So we're really activating local planning and local thinking, I think, is a missing ingredient. Definitely we need to keep working on insurance. I'm not minimizing that. That is a huge issue. But there needs to be a lot more partnership and diversification of how we pay for all this. And there's a lot that we're not doing yet.
Thanks so much, Eric. I think that leads us to sort of one of the big concepts that I think is really important for us to be expanding our thinking about, which is scale. So we actually have a slide that we can move to as well that helps like describe some things about scale here. But what Eric was just describing about figuring out how to activate local action, we know that fire knows no jurisdiction or boundary, right? So we have actions that individuals need to take. We have actions that families need to take. We have neighborhood actions. We have community level actions. We have regions and all fire departments and CAL FIRE units, and we've got state agencies and we've got federal government. So we've got all these nested scales of different organizations that have different kinds of responsibility. And every time I go to a fire conference, everyone talks about how we need to increase the pace and scale of our work. And what I think people mean by pace and scale when they say that is that we need to do more faster, and we need to spread ideas to other places to replicate them. And we need to, so they're talking about scaling out and scaling up. So they're just talking about two of the kinds of scale that are on this, this slide right now. Scaling up is your classic, we need to figure out a policy solution to this. So like Eric was just talking about, oftentimes people kind of overlook what can happen at the local level and just think, okay, we need a policy fix, something that can come down from above and help us, you know, solve this with a policy lever. And while certainly there are things that we need to address at that like policy level, that's not where all of the fire levers, system levers are. We just talked about how a bunch of those are actually about getting into community with your neighbors and about taking action at your own place where you live and getting into relationship with fire. That's all local action. So I think it's really important to expand our vocabulary and the kinds of scale that we're really thinking about how to use. So you can see this model actually comes from some scholarship in Canada where folks are working on different kind of community development design. And I think it's really important to think about how we could not just scale up to policy solutions or scale out, which means just sort of spreading actions that work in one place to others, but do some of these other scaling activities like scaling enabling conditions, scaling our initial conditions, and getting to some different kinds of change by building out our models of what the ways we can make that change and to be a little bit more nuanced.
All right, Tegan nudged me to say, let's start Q&A now. Good idea. I know we got like 8 minutes left here. So we do want to allow for some space and time for folks to ask questions of us, share ideas, just, I think there's mics coming around, is that right? Are there mics circulating yet? Okay, great. Yeah, so if anybody has a question, we would love to just spend a few minutes before we wrap up, allow some Q&A. I see one over here.
Hello, my name is Alice Lincoln Cook, and I live in Del Norte. My question, I heard you say the importance of family and your things that you have to do, and trying to manage it all and what you're doing to make it a safe place for your family. However, and my question was, this is a wildfire crisis we're in. If we're not putting high priority to the wildfire crisis and what we can do around it, we're not going to have a family to build. So while we hold our priorities, and I hold priorities to my family, I believe in my family, and that's number one to me, but I can't keep my family safe if I don't address the wildfires and the conditions within the wildfires. So, I mean, I agree with you, number one, family, but I disagree with you that that's your priority. So, I mean, family's my priority, but building that is, in order to make my family safe, I have to deal with all the priorities around it. And coming from reservation land and all that stuff is vital to have that fire knowledge and know what we can do to protect our family, to educate our family so that they can do what we have been, what we need on our land. And so I think it's super important, so.
Great, thank you so much. Is there another question from the audience?
I'll just acknowledge, I'm 100% with you. That's what I'm saying, is that we all need to work on this together and work at many scales and turn all the dials. And what I'm just really trying to share is that in my own family, I'm just gonna be vulnerable about this and say, my own family feels like it's somebody else's problem. And I'm just trying to share with my family, like, we own a part of this. We're a part of the solution. So is the city that we might live in, or the county that we might live in, or the neighborhood that we might live in. We need to find motivation at all scales. And I'm trying to say within my family, we need to lead by example. And if we can start here, then we can inspire others around us. And then together, we're gonna lift that vision and that possibility in partnership with all the amazing folks that are in this room and throughout the state that are highly energized and excited to work in partnership with us. So it's a both and, but there's every opportunity whenever we're together as a family to talk about these issues. So thank you for sharing your point.
Hi, thanks. There are a lot of rooms like this happening all over the country in other industries, especially in the insurance industry, talking about what we can do about wildfire and how to tackle this problem. We're also looking for a shared vision, and so I'm curious, how do we bring the insurance industry and this wildfire industry together so that we can actually start working towards a shared vision?
Yeah, I can start. They may have thoughts as well, but the Department of Insurance is on our working group. We do have Mike Peterson, one of the deputies, a deputy commissioner, participating. So it's been great to have them as a partner in this work and even developing the work we've done to date on the roadmap. And I think we are engaging in California pretty heavily. I know that they were, again, the Safer from Wildfires initiative. They played a key role in leading that, along with a lot of other state and non-governmental partners. So I think there's a lot of activity in that space. As far as the local level and engaging, I would love to just engage in a discussion on that of where insurance plays a role locally. You know, maybe it's the policymakers, your brokers, our planners and inspectors and our fire professionals talking with insurance locally, right? What does that shared vision look like on the ground, and how do we actionably, you know, forge those partnerships? I know there's a lot of best practice out there happening, but I would love to maybe get some other panelists' thoughts there as well.
Maybe I'll just say quickly, stay tuned. If you look at the agenda, we're going to hear from Roy Wright from the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. There's another insurance conversation. There is so much happening in that space, and there's so much that we can do to say that we are clients worth investing in. And we, you know, insurance is part of our climate mitigation strategy, really, when it comes down to it. And so I think the irony is that the insurance pricing, affordability, and availability conversation that's happening in California is really accelerating the issues that we need to work on. And for those of us that work in this space, I mean, it affects our bottom line, and it suddenly becomes a way that we can get into communities and talk about these issues in a way that people can really relate to. It's actually kind of, in my mind, a really huge opportunity to accelerate the pace and scale work that we need to do. So I'm excited for those other presentations and look forward to more elevated conversation there.